So my name's Rachel Mitchell. I'm a Canadian certified professional ergonomist. I have been at this about 17 years now. I spent about half my time in office environments, the other half of my time in my steel-toed boots out in industrial facilities. So what I wanted to do today was to talk a little bit about how do you ensure that you have an appropriate ergonomics program. So your takeaway to take with you is the Ergonomics program Audit, which we passed around, and if you want an extra copy, if you end up writing on yours as we go today and you want an extra one, we do have some up here. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. I've left you with my business card and some information. There's some additional handouts, office ergonomics cards, lifting cards that I've left on the table over here, so feel free to help yourself to those. I am going to have to leave after I chat, so I will just kind of leave that stuff there. I'm taking part in the Return to Work panel at Ryerson after lunch, so I've got to make sure I can get back to that. Kelly has copies of the slides in PDF forms, so I don't know if she's auto sending those out or on request, but Kelly's got that. I'm happy to answer questions as we go. I work for Ergo Inc. It's an ergonomics consulting company just based in Innisfil up here. I work at the GTA. The company has been in business 25 years. We've been doing lots of draws and things this year to kind of celebrate that. So we're going to talk a little bit about kind of what your ergonomic program goals might be. Where are you trying to get to? We're going to talk about the new Msd Prevention Guidelines. Have people seen these? These are old, 12 years old. So there's a new launch of an Msd Prevention program. It's all online now. So really today is kind of going to be built around those resources and letting you know what's available and what's out there. And then we're going to sort of talk about the 10 steps you need to go through to ensure that you've got a comprehensive ergonomics program. And as we go, we do a lot of work with municipalities, and municipalities have been on the Ministry of Labor's hit list this year. So we're getting a really good sense from all of the inspections what it is the Ministry of Labor is looking for when they visit sites and are looking at your ergonomics program. So you'll see as we go, I'm going to have kind of green boxes that appear around things. Those are specific things we know they are asking about when they show up to visit a site, so you can kind of have a sense of what to expect if they're there. And then my real goal today is to tell you where to go to find resources that already exist, because we all have too much stuff on our plates. We do not need another job. Things that are ready to go, kind of, you know, you can just kind of roll out and you don't have to recreate the wheel at all. So that's really kind of the goal for today. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what are you required to do versus maybe what you should be doing. Anyone know what the Occupational Health and Safety Act says about ergonomics? Should have some people who are really good at the green book in here. What's the green book say?
Take every reasonable measure to protect the employee.
Does the word ergonomics appear in the green book ever? It does not. It does not. So if the Ministry of Labor were ever to write an order for a facility, they would write it under the General Duty Clause. So the General Duty Clause says you have to take every reasonable precaution to protect the health and safety of your workers, and that's sort of the expectation as far as ergonomics. That being said, we know that there are best practices out there. We know that the Ministry of Labor, when they do these things, will sometimes quote sort of gold standard best practices, and one of the things that they point at quite often are the Msd Prevention Guidelines. Because these were created in conjunction with Ministry of Labor and WSIB and the Health and Safety Associations, they are really considered to be kind of the best practice standards, and so they will point people at that as sort of some useful resources that are available. So the goal really is to ensure that we're addressing ergonomic hazards not in any way that is different from how you are already addressing your health and safety hazards. So you don't have a sort of entirely secondary system. It really should flow from the same pattern. So whatever path you are going through to address an sort of identified health and safety hazard, when an ergonomic hazard comes up, you deal with it in exactly the same way. It's not a different bucket, it's the same bucket, same path, and that's sort of what they're looking for in order to ensure that we are protecting workers. So they're looking for that to sort of be really amalgamated and combined with the systems that you already have in place in your system, and to kind of roll it in instead of creating secondary entities. So this is the website that these MSD Prevention Guidelines now live on, msdprevention.com. It was launched in the fall of 2018, but it is a continually changing and migrating resource. So what has happened is they moved a lot of the materials from these, 2002, I think, physical documents, and have started moving them onto the website, but they are continuing to update and then move documentation. So not everything that exists in the old paper version exists now in electronic, so I still tend to go to both as resources to find the things that I'm looking for. The website is super handy, very easy to access. It has 3 different kind of ergonomic programs, a quick start, a basic, and a comprehensive. I'm going to lead you through today kind of what the basic program that they outline looks like. The basic program is designed for kind of a medium to large size company, a company that already has a health and safety program in place, something that we can then roll an ergonomics program into. As I mentioned, it's kind of a 10-step process, so we'll go through that. Okay, so what do you think, we'll turn this back to you guys for a second, what do you think is the key to having an ergonomics program that is successful?
Having a process in place.
Okay, so we have some kind of like formalized process, people know what is supposed to happen, who is supposed to do it, and kind of what that flow looks like.
Buy-in and resources from
Absolutely, right? If the top doesn't buy in, you can make all the recommendations you want, but they are just falling into a black hole. What else? And that's a tough one sometimes. What else? Anything else? Okay, let's see what we can come up with. So the first piece is the management support piece that you alluded to. So if we need to make sure that we have those things in place. So you mentioned that we need resources from management, we need buy-in from management. What else do we need?
Come on, guys, I know you guys aren't this shy.
We need to maintain it with the employees and make sure that it's being done.
Okay. What else do you need from the top though? What kind of resources do we need?
Financial support.
Yeah, so we need financial support. What else do you need though?
dedicated, well, maybe not dedicated, but you need the people resources.
Right, you need the time. Because
Yeah.
everyone's like, I've got 17 jobs, I don't have time to do this. So it's about them providing financial resources, but also ensuring that people are given the time to do these things, right? That this is a priority that, you know, we all work in places where production, it comes first. And so like, oh no, we're really busy. So then all of this stuff gets left and we don't do it. So we need those things from them. So the leadership, who has an ergonomic policy? Who has just a health and safety policy but maybe has the word ergonomics in it somewhere? Either is fine. You don't need a standalone ergonomic policy. You can just stick it in your health and safety policy, but then you allude to both health and safety hazards as well as ergonomic hazards. So it can have both of those, because what you're looking for is to ensure, again, that those responsibilities are assigned out. Like, who is responsible for ergonomics? Because unfortunately, like, the health and safety person usually inherits ergonomics, and they've got enough stuff to do. And we need the people who are out on the plant floor, out there every day. We need them involved in the system as well. So we need that really clear definition of who is responsible for what and what the expectations are. So here's the handy thing for you. And one of the things Ministry of Labour is looking for is that you have an ergonomic policy or you have a health and safety policy and it utters the word ergonomics somewhere in it. Just a lot easier than creating a new one. But if you don't want to create one, if you pull these documents, and you can pull them off our website, you can also Google search to find them because they are still alive and well. Section 3B, page 14, has an ergonomics policy already written. And you copy and paste it, and then you change the company name. And ta-da, in 15 minutes you have your own ergonomics policy. Okay, do not recreate the wheel. So it's got really good resources in there. You can pull out the information. This is just the roles and responsibilities page, but I think the document is 4 or 5 pages long. So you can pull that information out if you feel like that's missing and you don't want to put it into your existing system. But this is the concept of the existing system, right? Your health and safety program now should follow this kind of plan, do, check, act, and we're really looking to do the same thing with the health and safety piece of it, or with the ergonomics piece, the same way that we're doing it with the health and safety piece. One of the other things that we need to think about doing is how do we embed ergonomics beyond the health and safety office, right? So one of the places that can be really handy to embed ergonomics is in purchasing. Because here's what happens. Somebody's chair breaks, and then their manager says, okay, well, pick a new chair. So they open the Staples catalog, and they think, okay, what's the prettiest thing I can get for $300? And it is a leather chair, maybe like the ones you're sitting on now, and it has some like really shiny chrome wheels. And it is maybe not the best chair for 40 hours a week sitting at your desk. It would be fine in a conference room, but it is not the appropriate chair for an office. And so one of the things that we try to do in our facilities are where those important purchasing decisions are being made, that somebody in that office either has enough background information, understands the concept of ergonomics to be able to assist, or they at the very least know that they have to put their foot down and say, you can't order this until you check in with so-and-so. So I have a huge facility with 500 people, and unfortunately I decided that I was going to insert myself in the middle of this route. So now when people try to order their own chairs, purchasing says you have to talk to Rachel first, and it's a manufacturing facility. But I have like a full-time job just helping people select the appropriate size chair for them, and I have gotten myself caught up in something that was bigger than I expected it to be. But you do need a way to kind of control how those decisions are made. If you have somebody who is purchasing tools, you know, are they looking for a hand tool that is the lighter version, or has less vibration, or has a nice rubber grip on it, or are they just buying the impact gun that is the least expensive? So think about how you embed it in there. The other place that you need to embed it is in engineering. So when someone is designing something new, it occurs to them to say, you know, in addition to that health and safety, you know, pre-start checklist that has to happen, maybe someone with some ergonomics background needs to also check this to ensure that when we picked the height of this table, we picked an appropriate height. Because you'd really rather know that before that item gets bolted to the floor. It's a lot harder to change after it's already bolted on the floor. And some of the ways that you can embed those things is to make sure that if you have, anyone have an Ergo team? Okay, so some places have an Ergo team, some places the health and safety committee. If you don't have an Ergo team, your health and safety committee should be dealing with ergonomics, and ergonomics should be in your health and safety meeting minutes, the same way the health and safety items are, because they do need to be covered by someone. Making sure that there is somebody on that committee who is from those departments. So do you have somebody from engineering who is on your health and safety team so they can say, oh yeah, no, we're designing this new thing over there, because oftentimes we maybe don't know if a facility is large enough that some of those things are happening. Okay, so the next piece that we need to consider doing is figuring out how do we facilitate the employees' involvement, right? Because we can't put all of this, again, onto kind of ourselves and to management. We need them to participate and be part of that. So how do we do that? How do we get employees involved in an ergonomics program?
Team.
Okay, so they might be members of your health and safety team or your Ergo team. What else do we do? Training? Yep, provide them with training. What kinds of things do they need to be trained on?
Ergonomics and Msd Prevention
Yeah,
and awareness.
like what kind of hazards are you looking for? How do you prevent them? Do you have a policy on thou shalt not lift this because it's too heavy? How else can we involve workers?
Do risk assessments at their workstation.
Yeah, involve them if you're doing risk assessments because they understand the job, they know what it looks like, they know what we tried 10 years ago before you worked there that worked or didn't work. Let's see what else we've got. So train them to recognize hazards, train them how to use controls and things that are in place, right? If you have a lift assist and nobody is using it, maybe they don't know how to use it, maybe it hasn't been maintained. Encouraging reporting. I put this one in red because we'd like to think that we all encourage people to report injuries, but sometimes we don't, right? Because we're like a bit afraid of opening a can of worms by saying, please tell us if you have problems. But listen, you'd really rather have someone tell you that their shoulder is starting to get sore so you can do something about it than I can't come into work today because I can't lift my arm anymore. And in places where we hand out leather jackets at the end of the year, if we haven't had any injuries, like, are you going to be the person on December the 6th who threw their back out, who then reports an injury and then 400 people don't get their leather jackets? You know, we can say we're encouraging reporting, but in that situation, you are not. Okay, so just give some thought to whether you really have an open environment where people are comfortable coming forward. Suggestion boxes, you know, the people who develop the best solutions are the employees who do the jobs, right? I've based my whole career on getting the employees to tell me what they think would make their job better and then taking credit for their ideas. Sort of. Because they have great ideas. And when I come up with an idea, I say, how about this? And they're like, well, it wouldn't work for this reason and this reason, but if you tweak it and do this, then all of a sudden it is going to work. Right? So we want to make sure that we're getting all of that great information from the people who do the jobs. We might have them involved in trials, right? If you've got a large enough facility, demo products, trials, get your vendors to bring you in stuff to try and see how it works. Part of your health and safety team, part of some kind of inspection process. Right? So that's really how we are trying to involve them. And they have to feel comfortable coming forward. They have to think that they're going to be heard. Otherwise, they don't bother, right? I had that idea 5 years ago, no one did anything, so now I'm just going to kind of keep my mouth closed and not say anything, right? And the environment might be different 5 years later, but people have sort of given up. So we need them to see that we are listening and that they are an important part of the program to move forward. So the Ministry of Labor is looking that you have a joint health and safety committee and that your joint health and safety committee meeting minutes include ergonomic action items if you do not have a separate Ergo committee. So they will ask to see your meeting minutes if they're doing full-blown inspections of your program. So here's an interesting thing that happened. You can't read anything on here, so that's fine. It's not important because I took out all sorts of information at the bottom so I don't give away stuff about the company. But this was a huge company and we did discomfort surveys for every single employee by hand, and I had to tally them all in Excel. Because corporate required us to do discomfort surveys. So anyways, it was a really useful thing because, you know, as an ergonomist, shoulder stuff is on my radar, low back stuff is on my radar. I'm looking for those things when I walk through a manufacturing facility. But we did this, and the highest peak was a specific department complaining about their ankles. Not on my radar at all. And it was a paint department who was standing on metal grating, where you can't put matting down, and grading has no give and is hard on the feet. And so we went through a whole insole development process for that particular department. But had I not done this, we would have had no idea that that was going on, because it just was not on anybody's radar. We've also had a facility where they were doing a whole bunch of soldering, and they wanted to replace chairs. And everyone was sitting on something different. Some people had brought in, it was like a little shop, some people had brought in like their own dining room chairs and were sitting on those. And because they do so much forward-leaning work, we really couldn't quite figure out what the right kind of chair was going to be, and we brought in all kinds of demos, and people selected, the company allowed people to, because they tend to keep their employees for super long periods of time, people there were all very senior, they all picked the chair that they felt worked best for the way that they worked. And it was great, the response was fantastic, right? So we can really involve people sort of in these processes. Okay, so the next thing that we need to think about doing is making sure that we have some kind of way to do risk assessments. And this is making sure that we have a process to do risk assessments. We know who's going to do them, we know how they're going to get done, we know what kind of documentation we're going to do, people know how to request an ergonomics assessment, right? So this is about the procedural stuff behind how do you go about getting an ergonomics assessment done, right? So do you have an in-house team? Is your joint health and safety committee going to be the first people to look at an issue if it comes up? And then if they can't solve it, maybe then it goes to somebody with a higher level ergonomics training. You've got to figure out what that's going to look like, who's going to do it. And then you have to figure out how do you assess jobs. Because usually what most of us do is we put out fires, right? So we wait until there's an injury, there's a complaint, there's an issue, and then we go out and look at it, right? And that's fine. That's where you have to start. You know, in terms of reactive ergonomics, at the end of the year, we should be looking at our injury stats to kind of see where those appear and making sure that we're doing some assessments in those areas where there tend to be injuries. But as your program gets more advanced, we should be looking at doing things that are more proactive. So are you aware of a new engineering project for a particular department? Do you know that a department is looking to replace their workbenches or replace their hand tools or are replacing their office chairs? And then looking to see how you can do some assessments and get involved in those processes. So the ministry has been known to go through people's injury stats to see what departments have injuries, and then they will ask to see that you have done some kind of ergonomic assessment. Even if that assessment is just your Joint Health and Safety Committee doing checklists, they want to know that somebody is following up in some kind of formalized way, right? So the documentation piece really is important here. Once you, yeah.
We have to use the word ergonomics. I'm thinking of a case we just dealt with in our committee.
Yeah.
Where you have to reach into a large container, and as you reach further into the bottom of the large container, you can pull
Turn
out
your back.
or hurt your ribs.
Yeah.
And so we've got a tool for
Yeah.
At no point have we used the word ergonomics.
It's fine. You're addressing a hazard that, from my perspective,
It didn't even occur to me that we would use the term ergonomics. It's just preventing injuries.
Absolutely, absolutely. You just have to be like when you're looking at your health and safety policy, you need to be cautious that your policy is not so restrictive to health and safety hazards that somehow something that is, you know, ergonomics is really about the cumulative injuries that occur over time, right? So this, you know, repetitive back bending that happens in a job wouldn't get caught normally by a regular health and safety audit, and so you need to make sure that the verbiage you've chosen is wide enough to acknowledge both. I think in a policy it is helpful to use the word ergonomics. When you're dealing with a hazard in that way, no, you don't need to use that, because we all would acknowledge that that falls both into the realm of health and safety and ergonomics, because contact stress, repetitive forward bending, those are ergonomic hazards. You don't have to call them that. As long as you're addressing them. They just want to know you're doing something. What you call it is up to you. And if you want to call, and I would say that Msd Prevention is used interchangeably with ergonomics. So again, in a policy, I would make sure that you're looking at injury prevention, both acute injury, but also long-term musculoskeletal disorder prevention, and then that covers ergonomics. That answer your question?
Sure.
Okay. Maybe. Okay, so the next piece is how do you go about doing your hazard assessments? So your hazard assessments might look like any number of things. So if you do not have an ergonomics team, if all you have is a joint health and safety team, which is fine, and you've got some kind of monthly checklist that they are going out into the facility, then I would take a look at your checklist and make sure that the kinds of hazards that are ergonomic hazards or musculoskeletal disorder hazards, that those appear on your checklist, right? This is not just, is there a trip hazard on the floor? Is there something that's going to hit me in the head? This is, does this job have a lot of repetitive body movements? Are we lifting things that are really heavy? Those types of hazards. So you can look at just embedding those questions into your monthly inspections, because then that ensures that you are kind of building it into the sort of regular process that is happening at your facility. So it might be a walkthrough, it might be a checklist, and then as you get further along, then screening can become sort of a more quantitative assessment, which we'll get to in a second. So that's kind of the starting point, is that kind of walkthrough, that qualitative sort of catching of issues, either based on inspections or somebody reporting an issue. As you head out into the facility, and I sort of alluded to some of these now, what are the things that you're looking for that fall into this bucket of kind of ergonomics hazards? What are the things in a job that present risk?
Lifting, bending.
Lifting,
pushing,
bending, repetitive motions,
Lots of wrist movements.
Lots of
Awkward positions.
awkward postures. Okay, so awkward postures is the bending, is the wrist movements, they all kind of classify together. Repetition, you said heavy lifting, that kind of covers the three. So we consider force, repetition, and posture, that combination of the three, to basically be the source of any kind of musculoskeletal hazard or ergonomics hazard, right? You can lift something heavy once, but if you have to lift something heavy a whole bunch of times in a super awkward posture, you're much more likely to get injured doing those things. Right? So those are the things we are looking for. Those are the things your Joint Health and Safety Committee, your supervisors, whoever is sort of responsible for these things should be looking for when they are out and about in the facility. Okay, so in the first job, what kind of hazards would you expect?
Repetitive.
Okay, so it's a super repetitive job. What else?
Looks
Awkward.
interesting.
It could be awkward if I've got to get something like from the back of a skid or something that's up on a higher shelf. And there's the potential that it could be heavy, right? Depending on the size of boxes. What about the second job? Where the-
Sitting down all day. flat
Okay,
back.
so prolonged sitting is a risk factor for back issues. What else is there a lot of when you drive a forklift? Neck twisting. So really repetitive neck movements happen with forklift driving. Anything heavy occur with forklift driving? We don't think of it.
Lifting the propane.
The propane tank, 52 pounds typically, sometimes 62. The third one, I think these are Twinkies. What kind of risk factors in a job like that?
Repetitive motion.
Really repetitive jobs, yeah. Potentially some awkward postures. And the fourth one, cutting tubing. Yeah, maybe some awkward wrist stuff. Yeah, so this isn't heavy, but this would be forceful, right? Cutting through things can be quite forceful. So those are the kinds of things that we're looking for in a job. So when you are out and you're looking for hazards, you do need to have some kind of system to prioritize those, because you're going to need to decide where you're going to start. Most of the times, though, I would say that if you start to look at your hazards and everyone agrees what that hazard is and how to go about fixing it, you really do not need to go any further in terms of how you assess it, right? If you know how to fix it, don't worry about how bad it is, just fix it, right? If everyone agrees about how we're going to solve it. When you need to get into more in-depth analysis of jobs is really in the scenarios where either we can't agree on what the source of the problem is, or we know that the solution is super expensive, right? If the solution to a problem is very expensive, then you maybe want to draw a very clear line in the sand about whether this job is okay or not okay, is fixing it nice to do or need to do, right? And so you can do a more quantitative assessment, you can have an ergonomist do those things for you in order to draw the line in the sand if you have to make that decision. But where solutions are simple, you don't need to analyze the heck out of these things, just fix them. Right? Just make the job better to protect the health and safety of your employees. Now, if you are looking for something beyond a basic checklist that maybe you're doing as part of your joint health and safety inspections, what's very cool now is the MsdPrevention.com website has a thing called a tool picker. And what you do is you tell it what kind of job you're dealing with, and they've got everything in here, like lifting jobs, patient handling, using a computer in a car. You click that, you tell it the level of detail you want, and it spits out tools that are appropriate for the task and the link to use them. And almost all of them are things where there's then like a PDF version. There are a few, if you're looking at really in-depth tools that are computer programs you would have to purchase, but almost always there's some kind of PDF. So you can download the checklist. So this one I told it I was worried about some kind of arm work, and I wanted hazard identification, and it said, you know, I had these 3 choices. I clicked on it, and then there's the checklist that it spit out that I could use. Okay, so it's super easy. It's designed to give you the right kind of checklist for the right kind of tasks. You're not applying the same tool to every single job, right? Because we have different jobs, different types of needs. Obviously, something like in-car computing is a completely different monster. So that's a really great resource that's available for you through that website if you need something like that. Okay, so once you have figured out that you've got a hazard, then you are going to need to figure out how you're going to fix it. So you need some kind of process for that. So you're going to have, hopefully, a list of a couple of solutions. How do you prioritize? Like, how do you decide what the right solution is going to be?
maybe in your risk assessment, your highest area of risk?
Yep. And what if you've picked like just one problematic issue and you've got 4 different solutions to it? How do you pick which solution is going to do you the best? Like, do we train people to lift with better technique, or do we install lift assists? How do we decide?
Trial.
Okay.
Using the hierarchy of controls.
Using a hierarchy of controls, beautiful. So ideally, one of the things the Ministry of Labor has been looking for is that you don't just retrain people every time there's an issue, right? We can't blame everything on the employees and say, well, they just should have used better technique to move this 80-pound box. Like maybe they shouldn't have been asked to move the 80-pound box in the first place. So that we are addressing the hierarchy of controls, right? So our first choice is something that eliminates the risk. So a lift assist would eliminate the risk completely. We just don't lift that thing anymore. So whether it's a lift assist, maybe an alternative is instead of the thing coming in an 80-pound box, it comes in 2 40-pound boxes, right? So we've got this kind of hierarchy of controls to decide how we're going to select a solution, right? We don't want to just band-aid things. We want to kind of eliminate them at the source, because then you take out that sort of employee control over whether or not, I use good technique or not, right? You really have so little control over that. It's not your best sort of plan of action. The other thing is to consider, how does it affect the job before? How does it affect the job after? The poor maintenance folks would like us to consider whether or not the thing we're doing is going to make their life easier or harder. Because sometimes we make maintenance's life harder, and we just need to consider that. And then if we can, we want to trial things and demo things and allow people to have an opportunity. So just make sure if you think about how you are selecting solutions, are you considering more than one option? And then are you really kind of thinking through all of these things before you are just like, yes, we're going to do that? 'Cause sometimes when we jump to a solution too quickly, we don't always pick the right one. So we want to make sure that we kind of set that we've got action items assigned to everyone. Don't assign everything to yourself, assign stuff to other people. I'm all about delegating, right? You have to delegate stuff to other people, like note-taking in meetings. And that you've some kind of expectation for timelines. So I'm going to give you another kind of resource out there. So the new website, Msd Prevention, is going to have what I'm going to call an idea bank of people who've submitted ideas and things they have done in their facilities, and they're actually looking for people to submit case studies. So they're asking people to submit your success stories because they want to create a bank of them. But there's not a lot on there right now. So the Washington government, their kind of equivalent health and safety facility, they do have an idea bank. So you go in here and you say, like, what risk factor do you want to fix? And you can even tell it a specific industry you work in, and then it spits out all these case studies and checklists and posters people have created, and you can steal other people's ideas and then take credit for them, right? And then you look great. So, I told it that I had to deal with some, heavy boxes or something, and it was like, here was an example of a place that used a roller conveyor to get stuff out of a truck. Right, so there's lots of really good kind of resources. They have posters, they have all kinds of stuff. So it's a great resource, because sometimes it's a lot of pressure to feel like you have to come up with a solution for something, and I think, pass the buck along if you can. Steal someone else's ideas. Okay, so if we are implementing a solution, so we've picked our solution as part of our kind of ergonomics program, what is the key to being successful when we roll this thing out? Sometimes this is where things go wrong. What do you have to do to be successful when you roll it out?
Buy-in.
You need buy-in, right? If you just throw stuff at people, they're like, I've been doing this job this way for 20 years and you want me to do it differently? I don't think so. Your idea's, no good. What else?
Well, if you're getting someone like an ergonomics desk or something, not just giving them the tools, but training them exactly how they're supposed to use them.
Sure. Okay, let's be totally honest. How many people know what every single button on the underside of your chair does in your office? Maybe one. right? So if we provide people with equipment, then we should teach people how to use it. And odds are, if you don't know what every button does, your chair maybe could be more comfortable than it is now, because there's some magical button you haven't pressed yet, and your chair is going to get more comfortable. There is a YouTube video for your chair, I guarantee it. You just have to find it. Or just pull the buttons and see what happens. But we need to train people to use things. What else?
Just overall communication of the program.
Yeah, like this is what's going to happen, this is when it's going to happen, this is the expectation, and we would like your feedback. Right? That employee participation we talked about at the beginning is really going to be key to being successful here. Also, it happening in the decade in which you say it's going to happen is super helpful. Because sometimes people just give up, right? They're like, we've been talking about this forever, it's never going to happen, right? So making sure that if things are taking longer, that we are communicating to people, we're still on it, I haven't got there yet. I will go out to the plant floor and I'll say to someone, listen, I got really busy, I haven't forgotten about you, this is still on my list. Right? People really appreciate that. No skin off my back doing it. If I'm really busy, I send them an email and tell them I'm too busy to come and see them, to tell them that I'm too busy to get it done. And then, things are never perfect the first time we do it, right? There's some tweaking that has to happen. We might have to adjust things. We have to recognize that that is part of the process and not assume that once we have put the box there, that it's done. Sometimes what happens to me is I will order, a new ergonomic product. We just ordered some mechanical crawlers for getting underneath some airplane gear. And someone was like, it's arrived. And I only go to the facility a couple days a month. And I get there and the thing has been in a box. No one's even taken the tape off the top of the box and it's been sitting there for 2 weeks. Right? Don't assume that because it's in the building, anyone's using it yet. Right? So we've got to make sure that we do that kind of last piece to make sure it is in place, people are comfortable using it. Right? I have a facility where we did anti-vibration gloves. It took us so many anti-vibration gloves to find gloves that people would actually wear and that people liked. This was for some really heavy duty grinding. So these top ones they were terrible. People hated them. And so nobody wanted to try anti-vibration gloves. And then eventually we found ones that were more like a mechanic's glove, a lot thinner, not as much vibration protection, but people at least were willing to wear them, right? So we made some progress. I had some folks who were building their own stools and we got them some really cool creepers with, back support and things on them. And that was done, you may not be able to tell, but this thing's actually coated in a plastic garbage bag because it was a demo and we were told that we couldn't get it dirty if we wanted to be able to return it, so we wrapped everything in plastic while we were testing it. Okay, so we have touched on the training piece a little bit in terms of providing some training to employees about the hazards that are present in their job and how to use the stuff that we have put out there for them. Who should be doing this training? Who should be delivering it?
People who specialize in it.
Somebody who specializes in it, right? It could be a supervisor who's done some ergonomic training. It could be a health and safety person who's done some ergonomic training. It might be the supplier of whatever piece of equipment you have purchased. It might be an external consultant. It just has to be somebody who knows the topic well, right? So that they are believed and can sort of get the buy-in of employees. So the things that we should be providing training on are what your roles and responsibilities are, right? The roles and responsibilities of an employee are to let us know if they see hazards, and that's not just the trip hazard. It is also the ergonomics hazards in the environment. How to report them, how to use the controls, what the best practices are, and any kind of job-specific things, right? There might be something specific to a job, like we use this tool, this is the strategy, this is kind of the best practice for this particular job. So we want to do that. When do we do this training for employees? When should employees get ergonomics training? Prior to doing a job. So we do it usually when they're hired, maybe? Is that it?
When you change something.
Okay.
When you modify something.
And a little refresher once in a while is not a bad thing. People forget. So the ministry will ask to see training records and they want to see what people are being provided with training on. Again, you can roll it into your health and safety training as long as you are acknowledging the presence of other types of hazards as well. If you were looking for resources for training, you don't want to create something and you would like to steal somebody else's training materials, we do some training. The Health and Safety Associations have modules and handouts and things. The Center for Occupational Health and Safety's got stuff. There's stuff everywhere. That idea bank that I told you about, I told it that I had an issue with, pushing or pulling, and it popped out a pushing and pulling poster for me. So that kind of was an already off-the-shelf thing that came out. This is an app. So this is the Canadian Centre for Occupational Health and Safety. They have an app. You can also get this off their website, but they have this fantastic, it's not just ergonomics, it's also health and safety, but you go in, you can kind of pick from the table of contents. I picked ergonomics. This is just the beginning of the alphabetical list of all the things they have fact sheets on. So if you're doing these 5-minute toolbox talks in the middle of summer and you wanted to do one on heat stress, there is a 1-page heat stress handout you could give to the supervisors. They could deliver that in the 5-minute trainings. There was hand tools. There's stuff on why back belts are a terrible idea. Anything that you're looking for, it's in there. So that's an app. It's a free app you can download. This was a training tool that we developed for a client for vehicle ergonomics. This was people who were doing a lot of driving, utility workers, and so we created a checklist that they were going to use for part of their training process. So lots of ways to kind of get at these things, and lots of stuff that already exists out there. Once we implement a control, we do have to make sure that it did what we thought it was going to do. It doesn't always do what we think it's going to do. When do we need to follow up with people to ensure that we have been successful?
Within 30 days, I would think.
Within 30 days, okay? 30 days gives people time to get used to something, because sometimes on day one they all hate it, right? And they've got to learn how to use it, and they've got to kind of get over that hump. What happens if you wait for 30 days, though?
You change it.
Yeah?
They develop bad habits.
Yeah? But what could we miss if we wait 30 days to check on a change? Right. There's some stuff you need to know on day one, and there's some stuff maybe you want to know at the end of the first week, and then there's a separate set of stuff you want to know after 30 days. So you do need to do some check-ins kind of at some different points, because you're going to get different information, right? If people just hate it on day one, you're like, okay, that's fine, we'll just give them some time. But if someone highlights that there's an issue on day one, you do need to know about that ASAP. So this comes out of the paper version. It's not up online online yet, but it is a 1-page feedback survey. So you can print these out and give them to people. They rate kind of out of 5 what it was like before, what it's like now, if you want to collect data in a more formal way. So some resources available for you for that. You should also, if you did some kind of risk assessment, do it again to make sure that you have in fact improved the situation. The last kind of 2 pieces are really about how we retrospectively look back at our ergonomics program and look back at the things we have fixed to make sure that our program is working as anticipated, right? These things are not perfect. They are works in progress, and we continue to kind of modify the programs as we learn lessons, but also as the environment that we are working in kind of is constantly changing. So at the end of an implementation effort, you're doing any kind of large rollout, whether it is for an ergonomics thing or whether you are implementing a new line and ergonomics and health and safety are just being taken into consideration as part of that, we do need to kind of do that step back to look at, did it go well? What were the barriers we encountered? What were the issues? And how could we do this better next time? So it's just kind of an opportunity to look back at that. And then at the end of the year, we really should be looking back at our program as a whole. So sometimes we just do this as part of our December meeting minutes. We might go through and look at how many assessments did we do this year? What were the risk ratings on things if we were doing something quantitative, and what are those risk ratings now? We might audit the entire program. So I have given you an audit that you can use in order to kind of assess where your program is at. This is just a facility I was in. They color-coded their jobs red, yellow, and green. And so we had been tracking over time kind of where the color coding for all of the jobs in the facility were over time. There is also a like 7-page audit. The stuff that is in your audit is sort of a compressed version, but there is like a 7-page version of an audit in there as well if you're looking for something a little bit more detailed to look back at the program that you have. And so it is on page 3 of section 3B. And that really then audits, when you do the more detailed one, it audits each of those 10 steps. So it has an audit section on stakeholder feedback, it's got an audit section on your training, it's got an audit section on your employee participation, and all of those kind of various pieces. All right, so that is the end of kind of what I wanted to get through. Did no one filled out the audit as we went, did they? Take it back, try it in your office, pick something where you think maybe there's a piece that you could work on, and then kind of between now and the end of the year, see if there is something in your program where you can look to make some improvements. Like, where is the spot where you don't have as much buy-in, or you don't have as much participation, or you don't have the resources or support that you need? Can I answer questions?
Was there information that the MOL
Is
was
looking
looking
for?
for? Was there anything else that's come out of the Public Works?
The Public Works one, they're really doing most of their audits at the program level, so they're really wanting to see that there's a documented program. So they're asking for policies, they're asking for injury stat reviews, they're asking for training records, they're asking for meeting minutes. Like, they're looking, not that they have fixed a specific issue, but that you have a system to deal with this. They are doing field visits as well, so they are doing some of that, but they're basically, Public Works is a very large department that does lots of things. They're picking one job task and going out and just sort of spot inspecting that. So again, it really highlights that they're not looking for companies fixing specific hazards. They want to know that the company has got a system in place to deal with anything that should arise, and have a system in place for employees to report issues, and for those issues then to be dealt with in an appropriate way. What else?
I have a question.
Yeah.
More of an approach to take. So a lot of times, going out and working with an employee more on a proactive basis.
Yeah.
A lot of mindset is don't poke the bear.
Yeah.
So how do you get past that sort of mentality?
Don't poke the bear from the employee, or don't poke the bear from management? Who's telling you not to poke the bear?
Probably management saying it because you don't want to make
Yeah.
the employee think, oh, now I've got an injury.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of this idea of reporting and how we encourage reporting, right? So, sort of to take a step back. So one of the things that can happen when you really take a hard look at your ergonomics program and you start doing some real promotion of your ergonomics program, right? So you start, one of the really important things to do is, if you do something and it's successful and it's just down in like a department at the back and nobody else knows that you did it, like, you make a poster of like, this is what it looked like before, and look at all this great, like the anti-vibration gloves, not a big deal. We made a poster and we put it up by the cafeteria, like, this department has new anti-vibration gloves. And now all of a sudden employees who were disgruntled and thought no one was listening are like, oh, someone's listening, and then they stop me in the hall and they're like, our department, the anti-fatigue mats are curling up at the corners. Like, these are easy things to fix. So you do want to kind of celebrate that success. But one of the side effects of really promoting an ergonomics program is, in year 1, your injury reporting will go up. Because part of this is encouraging people to come forward if they're having issues. And sometimes when management who has not been involved in the development of an ergonomics program then sees their injury stats, people freak out. And so it really is important that we acknowledge that this is a likelihood, and people are warned and people know to expect it. But what we have to remember is that, Bob saying he has right shoulder issues, and me going out and showing Bob how to, like, oh, let's move this from here to here, and let's try to do this a different way, and let me find out if we can order this jug of whatever in a smaller size for you, you know, he's still at work. And if we don't do that, then he's not going to be at work, right? And the average back injury is going to cost a company 6 figures. And so while the number of claims can go up by poking the bear, the size of your claims are so much smaller and are typically not lost time claims. But it is a mindset to get around, and it's pretty common. In terms of the employees trying to convince somebody to try something different, I mean, that is also a challenge. So one of the approaches that I've been trying to take more recently, which I feel like is maybe working a little bit better, you know, my strategies have evolved over the years. But one of the things that I will say to someone is, listen, if you've got some discomfort and you continue to do your job the way you're doing it today, I can pretty much guarantee you're going to continue to be sore. Right? Like if you don't do something differently, nothing is going to change. And they'll say like, oh, but I'm not sore. Okay, well you're not, you know, but you're 25 years old and you are intending to do this job for the next 40 years. And so I want to help you make decisions today about how you do this job, not because I'm concerned about whether or not you're going to be successful today or next week. I'm concerned about whether you're going to be successful 5 years from now or 10 years from now. Right? And as a female, sometimes when I'm saying to someone, listen, I don't want you to lift this 40-pound box, you know, this big burly guy is like, you know, I'm going to ignore Rachel because she clearly can't lift a 40-pound box, which is fair. But I'm not worried about whether or not he can successfully pick up the 40-pound box. I will acknowledge to him, you can totally do it. Like, I am sure you can do it. But if you do it for the next 5 years, I'm concerned about what your back is going to be like, right? And so let's look at how we make decisions to kind of protect the longevity of your career.